Welcome everyone into the Stay Interviews room. We're going to talk a little bit about what Stay Interviews are, how they're percolating, and how we're approaching it from culture and from strategy. So before I do that, I just want to do a quick land acknowledgement. As a representative of ASU, I acknowledge that ASU sits on the ancestral homelands of Indigenous communities and tribes that have inhabited this land for centuries, including the Akimel O'odham and the Peeposh peoples. I also acknowledge and pay respect to Indigenous elders, past, present, and future, who have stewarded this land from generation to generation. I'll introduce myself and then I'll turn it over to Cary. My name is Abby Baker. I am the program manager with the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. We provide quality non-credit learning opportunities for people over the age of 50. And now I will turn it over to Cary.
Thank you, Abby, and thank you for the land acknowledgement. That was, it's critical, and thank you for remembering that for this group. My name is Cary Lopez. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives at the University Design Institute. And we got a shout out from President Crow in the keynote this morning where University Design Institute is positioned globally and across the United States to help organizations, universities recognize that the way we have been structured, our policies, processes, people, programs, are not a given, that we can actually influence how we are designed to achieve our social imperatives. So it's a very exciting organization, and I'm happy to share in some of the work with Abby here for the Stay Interviews. So we want to move on to the next slide. So what are Stay Interviews, and why this, why now, how did this come to be? This was actually in a conversation that our VP of Culture, Colleen Jennings-Rogensack, kind of asked a question of a group, why do we only do exit interviews? At the point at which it's too late to really impact or make change to help retain an employee, why aren't we doing stay interviews and recognizing what gives people life and joy, and why do they stay? And how can we maybe improve some of those factors for them? And as Abby says here, why wait to make a change until after the employee leaves the university? So that's really our call to action. And I'll let Abby talk about the amazing group of folks who have come together to help answer this call.
Thanks, Cary. So it really has become a pan-university effort. We have a working group that has members from several different units and departments within ASU and throughout the enterprise. We do have staff and faculty representation in our working group. We kind of made an intentional decision to not involve students in this space because we want to focus on our employees, and we want to focus on conversations around employees, which involve both staff and faculty. So if you're interested in joining our group, we're kind of in the last throes of preparation, but I will put in the chat our email addresses, and you can just email us. What's really kind of cool about the group is that we come from so many different areas of the university, and we have such different experiences and amount of knowledge of the enterprise. So I really want to kind of hold space for, I think it was Jay Nicole, who in the main group said something about how oftentimes people get so caught up in ASU that we forget that there's new people, right? And so we really in this group do try to hold space for the fact that some people are brand new in their roles. I've been part of ASU as a student and staff member for the past 10 years. But I'm 3 months into my role. So there's just lots of intersectional ways that we approach the conversation. Oh, Cary, your turn.
Abby, take it away. So one of the things that we've been doing is obviously curating this list of stay interview questions that managers and leaders can ask their teams and their folks. There's many times these are research-backed questions, so they've been empirically studied in research studies. They do come from, practical sources as well, such as Harvard Business Review, all kinds of places. So you see on your screen here a sampling of some of these questions, and we have a question for you that we would like to ask. So because the polling feature in breakout rooms is a little challenging. We created a Google form and we would love your input. As you read through these questions, the question we would like you to answer is, how comfortable would you be with your manager or leader or supervisor asking you questions like these? So if you wouldn't mind hopping to that Google form and just answering our question, we'll try to share real time what the results look like.
Cary, can you repeat the question just one more time in case people might have missed it?
Yeah. So in the chat, we listed a form, and I did see a couple more people hop on, so I'll include the link again. But our question for you is, as you read through these questions, these kinds of examples of stay interview questions, how comfortable would you be with your manager, supervisor, boss, leader coming to you and asking you these kinds of questions? All right, Abby, you want to give us some insight into how people are feeling? All right, so we have a blend here. It looks like kind of half. We've got very comfortable and comfortable kind of highlighting there. So this is actually really interesting. Oh, manager versus top level leadership would be different. Absolutely. And the intention behind stay interview questions, at least as they're talked about in the literature, is it requires a level of trust. It requires a comfort level and a sense of psychological safety for you to feel comfortable answering these kinds of questions with someone, which kind of implies the direct supervisor-supervisee relationship, not necessarily the skip level kind of relationship. All right, so some interesting data points. Thank you for your responses. So Abby, do you want to talk through some of our other interventions or suggestions that we have?
Certainly. So as Cary's already kind of talked about, stay interviews are just one part of a larger conversation. I think we've all been in spaces within the enterprise and outside of it, right? And other roles that we've played where we give feedback and it's either not listened to, it's invalidated, it's not integrated into the system, or it's just a checkbox, right? Like you think about your annual performance evaluation. With some managers, it's just a checkbox. You just do it. So we wanted to make sure that as we were building out the stay interview framework, that it was more than just a checkbox. So the first thing that we did is that we are creating an inventory of stay interview questions like the ones that we saw on the previous slide. We're working on it and it's in progress. It's almost complete. The second thing that we want to do is we want to create a set of tools, toolkits, and training pathways for managers or even top level leadership so that people are entering into safe spaces, so that the people who are conducting the stay interviews have the tools and capacity to be able to be involved in that conversation in an open manner, and just to be able to be successful in that. So some of the tools and toolkits and training pathways that we're thinking about are things like empathy training. We're working with some other units who are already building out frameworks. One of those is the Global Advocacy Certification Program. Kimberly, I see in your chat about integrating into EDGE. That's another thing that we're thinking about, right? So using the tools that we already have in innovative ways to empower managers and invest in managers and supervisors so that they have the tools to do this successfully. The third aspect is collecting data and then using that data. And there's a very key word here, which is the ethical use of data. And we have lots of fun conversations about how you ethically use data, what that means, what we can safely promise, right? But the hope is that if we're able to collect data from these stay interviews and relay that up to leadership or out to the community, it's able to create in some ways like a heat map of healthy or unhealthy units within the enterprise, units that are doing it well, units that might need some more support and services, and to also be able to have really frank conversations with managers about ways that they can improve. And so the goal is that it empowers managers and supervisors and leaders to understand how they can grow. And that's difficult, right? Because ethical use of data just in general is a difficult topic. And now we're like talking about data around feelings and culture and hopes for the future. And that's really hard. So then the fourth part of that is a literature and business case. So we're doing a literature review on stay interviews. We're creating a business case because the literature, both academic and otherwise, shows that stay interviews help with so many aspects of, I lost my train of thought. I got distracted by the chat. What was I saying? Oh, it helps us, it helps us so many aspects of like retention, progress forward on projects, efficacy, personal health, and well-being, lots of different things. So we're creating a business case around how this can save money, how it can create a better workplace culture, all those things. And then the last is a framework for implementation. So what does this actually look like? So we have a few more questions that we want to ask you. So Cary just put in the chat a link to our second Google form. This will work the same way as the first. It's going to ask you first, if you identify more as a supervisor or a supervisee. We recognize that we exist in a hierarchical structure where everyone is at least one of those, and most people are both. But I also think that you hold one of those as a closer identity. So I identify more as a supervisor than a supervisee, even though I have a supervisor too. So answer those questions just thinking about your role and your level of comfort surrounding this approach. And I've already seen in the chat that we have some people who have thoughts and feelings about our approach, and that's why we're here, right? So this is just a pretty standard survey. It doesn't have space for open comments, but the beautiful thing about it is that we're going to do a SOAR. So you're going to get to give us some comments that are more open. Cary, did I forget anything in this section as people are filling out that survey?
No, you did a wonderful job, my friend. Yeah, I love some of the discussions in the chat. Yeah, and part of our interest here, and as we move into the SOAR analysis, we see you as a community of folks that we can kind of leverage your expertise and your thoughts too. So we're trying to make this as interactive and responsive as possible so that we can tailor this to your interests too.
Yeah, and I think that people are bringing up really great points in the chat, which is that my positionality within the university doesn't really hold space for me to understand things like Jennifer's point of view, right? So in order for this implementation to work, we need as many voices as possible telling us about the complexity. We want to make it nuanced. We want it to have lots of gray area so that it can be responsive.
Yeah. Want to check out the form? How are our responses coming in?
Oh, awesome. Okay. So all of this is anonymized data. You didn't have a space to put in your name, so there's no way to tell who said it. Let me just zoom in a little bit in case that's helpful. So the first question, do you identify more as a supervisor or supervisee? Most people said that they identify as a supervisee. So that's interesting. That's not expected. So we're going to go through the answers from the supervisors first. It looks like a lot of people said that they do meet with their with their supervisees, 13 people. There's an honest response that we need. We need that, right? Because I also think too, this is not meant to be judgmental. We recognize that many people are beyond bandwidth capacity. So how do you hold space for that? How do you carve out time to have meetings with supervisees? Many people said that they would be interested in receiving. They would be interested in receiving a set of tools. Comfort level around data. This is interesting. Okay. So one interesting thing that I want to note here is that nobody said no. I am happily surprised by that. I expected a lot of no's in that area. And then supervisee, it looks like I set up the survey wrong. So I'm supervisee.
We'll come back to that one.
Right? And then less interested from supervisees in receiving the inventory, less interested in receiving tools from supervisees, and then comfort around data. Once again, very interesting. So once again, this is not supposed to be judgmental. There's no right or wrong. It's just for us to kind of gauge the climate.
Yeah, no, that was very informative. Thank you all for your responses. All right, and then one last slide before we dig into SOAR. So as we were doing, coming up with the inventory of questions, thinking through what our approach and recommendations are, we've come across 3 really interesting challenges that we want to crowdsource from you all. Which of these you think we should tackle today in the SOAR analysis? So the first is, for those managers who don't know how to do this well, how do we scale right size, right time, right content, leadership development in a resource constrained environment? So, and by resource constrained, I mean time. I mean, people's ability to focus in on this kind of personal development so you can support your team. So that's challenge number 1. How do we scale right time, right size, right content, leadership development to the masses at ASU? The second challenge is, because some managers may not be comfortable doing this well yet, or maybe there are some teams who wouldn't feel comfortable having this conversation with their manager. How might we conceive of creating a peer-to-peer stay conversation team where someone could call and say, hey, I want to have a conversation with someone. It's about my workplace dynamics. It's not a point the fingers kind of conversation or anything, but I just want to talk to someone. What kind of implications are there for creating a peer-to-peer stay conversation, working group, task force, team, community of practice, however we want to, whatever the group might be? The third challenge is, we do data-driven decision-making on the student side of the house very, very well. And we know that it has impactful outcomes for our students. How might we implement people analytics using the same kind of knowledge base that we've learned from our student side of the house? And what are the ethical implications of using data and people analytics? So those are our 3 challenges we would love your help with in the SOAR analysis. And we're going to let you pick. So again, final Google form, we promise. But what of the challenges would you like to tackle in our SOAR analysis today? So one last Google form, if you wouldn't mind clicking that link and selecting the topic you would like to help us SOAR on. It's a challenge we didn't think through. What if there is no clear winner? But it looks like we might, responses are still rolling in. All right, I think we can move forward. We shall SOAR on scaling leadership development for leaders. All right, so at this point, my friends, we are actually going to invite you into our Google document, and we're going to let our helpful SOAR and analyst friend explain the SOAR framework if you haven't heard about it yet. And while she does that, I'm going to invite us into the Google Doc. Take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you. This has been fantastic. One of the comments I saw that I definitely agree with is what great ways you modeled to include us in and have our input really guide your presentation. So thank you. So using the link that Cary just shared in the chat, you can navigate to their slides starting on slide 8, where they've actually opened up edit access for all of us to type right in the in the presentation. So go ahead and feel free to start doing that based on that idea. Cary, can you remind me again which challenge we're soaring on?
No, it's great. And I might actually go in and put it on all of the slides as well. So our prompting question is, how do we scale right size, right time, right content, leadership development training for supervisors writ large across ASU?